I'd like to offer a very warm welcome to our HashiCorp Europe digital event. I'm here to make a few opening comments, and then I'm going to hand things over to Mitchell and Armon to share the specifics of what we're going to talk about today. Over the next 4 days, nearly 10,000 cloud engineers will be participating in HashiConf. And although we organized this to run during European business hours, we actually have registrants from over 75 countries around the world. So thank you to all of you for joining us. As you'll see, we designed this event platform to give you opportunities not just to connect with each other, but also the experts in the HashiCorp community and the HashiCorp employees. And in case you miss any of these sessions, just know that they will be available on demand and ultimately on YouTube and our channel in the coming weeks. It's been an unprecedented year for all of us, not just in Europe, but throughout the globe. As the pandemic changed not just where we work, but how we work. If it were not for tools like Slack and Zoom, and their ability to scale infinitely as 10x more people started using them, we would have had a very different experience. And it is cloud infrastructure which underpinned all the applications we've used for the last 18 months that has really been the silent hero behind it all. And you all, the practitioners, are at the heart of this. You all leaned on HashiCorp to make the infrastructure go in a way that is actually relatively unseen. For the first time, we saw 100 million downloads of our open source projects in a single year, as the operators of cloud in the world were extraordinarily busy. But you also contributed to our products. We saw contributions from more than 12,000 different people in the last 12 months, totaling an astounding 280,000 code commits. This ecosystem, this community that we participate in, is truly astounding to watch as the scale of it really starts to be seen more broadly. This also manifested in participation in our user groups, where we had 143 HashiCorp user groups in 52 different countries around the globe, totaling more than 36,000 community members that collaborate and participate together to run infrastructure using the HashiCorp approach. And HashiCorp as a company has also been investing over that period. We've added well over 400 employees in the last 12 months, and we're now totaling 1,300 plus employees, many of whom started just like you in our community as contributors to our projects before becoming full-time employees to work on these products full-time. I'd be remiss if I did not acknowledge the extraordinary work of the ecosystem partners that have been doing this with us. Amazon, Azure, Google, Alibaba, Oracle, VMware have all done enormous engineering efforts to make our products work better together. This incorporates the additional features in the Terraform providers each time they introduce new projects. This incorporates the new services and back-end systems that are supported in Vault. This incorporates integrations with console into things like ECS and Fargate that allow that experience for our collective customers to be better at a deeply engineering level. For our bigger customers, we have a heavy reliance on system integrators to actually do the heavy lifting of bringing this cloud operating model into some of the traditional companies in the world that are perhaps not as familiar with cloud. So a huge shout out and thank you to all of those that are participating with us to make our customers successful each and every day. And really what we've seen over the last 12 months, which has been amazing to me, is this sort of growing breadth of our tech partner ecosystem, where we now have Terraform providers for things like Cisco ACI, things like Palo Alto Networks to allow you to use Terraform to configure networking gear, security gear. We've seen plugins in the Vault ecosystem expand enormously, things like system backend support for MongoDB, system support for Snowflake as a core element supporter within Vault. This is all only possible because of the work of our tech partners as we aspire to drive a standard and consistent workflow across any infrastructure element. So thank you to all those in our tech ecosystem. Probably the most fun thing for me to watch has been sort of observing this sort of cloud operating model for infrastructure that has been developed by the Zooms and the Roblox and the Snowflakes and the cloud native companies really make its way into the mainstream Global 2000. This blueprint for how to run infrastructure using Terraform, how to think about security using identity with Vault, how to think about networking in a consistent way across different platforms in a dynamic service-oriented way using console. That is how these cloud native companies are built, and that blueprint is now making its way into the biggest companies on the planet as they adopt cloud. Speaking of those large enterprises, we now count more than 150 of the Fortune 500 and nearly 300 of the Global 2000 as customers. You see some of those logos here on the slide because our growth in Europe and around the globe has been amazing. Our customers now include in Europe companies like Barclays in the UK, Ubisoft in France, Lufthansa in Germany, Alvia in Norway, ABN AMRO and Booking.com in the Netherlands. There are now more than 1,700 commercial customers of ours around the world that rely on HashiCorp products, with an ever-growing set also adopting the cloud-managed versions of those products that we now offer through Terraform Cloud on the HashiCorp Cloud Platform. And if you haven't taken a look at the HashiCorp Cloud Platform, I strongly encourage you to take a look, because we now have the ability to run Vault as a service on your behalf, and we think that's going to massively increase the surface area of adoption for our products across the globe. A big thank you to everybody that's been part of our ecosystem and community over the last 12 months. We wouldn't be here without all of you and your commitment to making our products better for everybody. I'm going to hand things over now to Mitchell. He and I are going to have some exciting things to talk about that will build on what we've created so far and help you all take your infrastructure into the future. Please welcome Mitchell, our co-founder and CTO.
Thanks, Dave, and welcome everyone to HashiCorp Europe. Our product vision at HashiCorp has always been based on recognizing a shift from what we call static to dynamic infrastructure. As part of this shift, we're seeing fundamental changes across the way you run infrastructure, do security, do networking, and how you run applications on top of all that infrastructure. We call the changes necessary to adapt to the cloud operating model. Today, I want to focus in on the infrastructure layer, which is all about the shifts around provisioning infrastructure. In the dynamic model, there's a lot more scale and differences in how frequently you're provisioning infrastructure, and there's a lot more heterogeneity in both what you're provisioning and where you're provisioning. So VMs versus containers, or cloud versus private data center, and so on. Our solution to this infrastructure layer is Terraform. And so I want to take a step back and talk about the history of Terraform before we talk about where we're going with it. Terraform really begins in 2011. This is 3 years before we wrote any lines of code for Terraform. In 2011, CloudFormation was released by AWS, and I wrote a blog post praising it, but I felt that it fell a little short of what I wanted to see. I wanted to see something more generic for infrastructure as code, something that worked with more providers than just AWS. And I also proposed that the only way to do this efficiently was probably open source. Fast forward to 2014, and no one had really addressed this challenge. HashiCorp was starting to hit this challenge in the real world, and so we decided to solve it ourselves, and we started writing the first version of Terraform. This first version of Terraform was released in the summer of 2014 and supported only AWS and DigitalOcean. We just wanted to showcase the initial functionality that we could support multiple providers and really focus on that core feature set out of the gate. Following the 0.1 release, our focus was on building an open source community, improving the workflow, and adding new infrastructure providers. The years 2014 to 2017 were relatively quiet for Terraform. Terraform wasn't an overnight success, and we weren't seeing a ton of growth in terms of downloads or activity. So we really focused in on making it easier to write providers and adding more providers ourselves. So our follow-on releases really quickly added support for new providers such as Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, Docker, OpenStack, and more. By the end of 2016, beginning of 2017, we had about 8 major releases since that 0.1. We have now grown slowly and surely to over 1,000 total contributors and over a dozen providers. And downloads were starting to double every month. We were starting to see real growth about 3 years in. By 2017, things were really beginning to take off for Terraform. In that year, 3 key things came into play. First, we announced the Terraform Provider Program. This let our partners and community members publish and support their own providers with Terraform, and we saw huge growth in the ecosystem of what Terraform could support. The second was that we announced an official partnership with Microsoft and Microsoft Azure. This was the first official cloud provider partnership, and this was a huge deal. This was the first time that a major cloud provider was very publicly supporting Terraform. And this was a huge milestone for Terraform's maturity and ecosystem. Lastly, we announced the Terraform Registry. The Terraform Registry is a place where our community members could submit modules and create blueprints for reusable infrastructure that made Terraform both reusable for experienced users and more approachable for new users. Then, from 2018 to 2020, we really put a lot of focus building on this foundation of making it more stable and expanding functionality. We released Terraform 0.12, the biggest open source release we've ever done, and this really laid the foundation for a stable Terraform. And we also released Terraform Enterprise and Terraform Cloud that provide workflows for Terraform in organizational settings. This was also the first foray of Terraform into a commercialization setting. Terraform's come a really long way. It's been amazing to see all the success it's had in the past 10 years. Something that's really important to note about Terraform is that our vision wasn't just to build infrastructure as code or make infrastructure as code as a concept succeed. We're really trying to address three major parts of infrastructure using infrastructure as code. One is automation, the second is workflows, and the third is ecosystem. When we talk about automation, this is perhaps maybe the most obvious part of Terraform, the idea of using infrastructure as code to provision any infrastructure in the world automatically. The way we sort of measure success around hitting our goals around automation is just how much is Terraform used. And we could see that it's used a lot. So by our measure, Terraform has been downloaded over 100 million times. There's over 100,000 monthly Learn users, and there's been over 10,000 certifications for Terraform. The next thing we really wanted to focus on was workflows. We wanted Terraform to provide a standard workflow that provided composition, collaboration, security, compliance, and management functionality. And the way we could look at the success of the workflow is looking at how much is Terraform being used in an organizational setting. And the best place for that is Terraform Cloud. Terraform Cloud today has over 120,000 users, and we're adding over 5,000 new users per month. And all of those users are doing over 30,000 Terraform runs a day. That's a lot of infrastructure being changed per day via Terraform Cloud. And lastly, we wanted to build a large and healthy ecosystem. Ecosystem for us is about Terraform supporting every provider and every resource out there that our community and customers need to have access to. For us, we could see the success of the community through how many providers and how many modules there are. There's over 1,000 providers in the Terraform registry and over 5,000 modules. The Terraform ecosystem supports pretty much everything. Today, Terraform is 7 years old. It's been quite a journey. It had a slow, humble beginning and certainly was not an overnight success, but then we saw it rapidly begin to grow in late 2016 and into 2017, and today it's a very mature product with thousands of members in our community. With that, we're excited to finally announce Terraform 1.0. Before we jump into what Terraform 1.0 means, we'd be remiss not to say thank you. Terraform would not be what it is today without the community. This includes our users, our contributors, HashiCorp ambassadors, and our partners who all helped us get Terraform to where it is today. So thank you very, very much. And before we get into 1.0 and what you can expect, this has been a really long time coming. So we wanted to share some of our favorite things that our community has been saying prior to us getting here. This sort of tweet shows that once you start using Terraform, you tend to want to use Terraform for everything, and I've certainly felt this way before. But folks are generally having a ton of success with Terraform. We constantly see tweets like this where Terraform is saving people a lot of time and pain, and we love to see it. And it usually works so well that with almost every release, we get a question of when is 1.0? So we're happy to finally have gotten there. And this tweet, I'm not sure whether to laugh or cry, but I think Terraform was first, I think. So now I want to take a moment and talk about what Terraform 1.0 means for our community and our customers. 1.0 is a major milestone in delivering infrastructure as code, and we're focusing on interoperability, upgrades, and maintenance as the highlight things for 1.0 and beyond. In terms of interoperability, we've seen since version 0.12, every release after that has really focused on laying the foundation so that we could promise interoperability between releases. Up to this date, we know we've made breaking changes we know we've made Terraform incompatible with other versions, and this is something we want to stop. So as of Terraform 1.0 and the 1.x series, any upgrades into Terraform 1.x from 1.0 will no longer require rewriting any existing code, and all 1.x configs will be backwards compatible. For upgrades, related to interoperability, all of the 0.x upgrades typically had some sort of complex upgrade guide associated with it, but in the 1.0 series, all upgrades will be straightforward and effectively a drop-in. And in terms of maintenance, we've always encouraged organizations to use the latest version of Terraform, and we still encourage people to do that today, especially since upgrades are getting so much easier. However, if you feel more comfortable staying on a single release, organizations can confidently and safely stick with 1.0 for up to 18 months. We'll be backporting fixes this whole time because 1.0 is a stable and primary release for us. And that's what Terraform 1.0 means in terms of how you work with Terraform. But just because we're at 1.0, it doesn't mean we're done iterating on Terraform. Far from it. We have a lot planned. So what's next? Where does Terraform go from here? The first thing we're looking at is testing. Testing is something that our community has asked for years, and we felt that it was the perfect feature to focus on for the 1.x series. The first phase of what we're thinking has been released in Terraform 0.15 as an experiment, and we'd like to ask you to take a look at that and provide feedback on how you think we should iterate on testing from here. Next, we're going to look at the Terraform CDK. This is something we released last year as a way to write Terraform in languages other than HCL and JSON. Today, we support TypeScript, Python, Java, C#, and we're looking to continue to add more languages. The Terraform CDK allows Terraform to act as this middle layer between the providers and resources that it supports and the front-end languages that you use to interface with it. So with the Terraform CDK, we'd like to continue adding support and developing more features. And finally, we're leaving it open to you. We thought the 1.0 was a perfect opportunity to leave the roadmap relatively open and spend some more time listening to the community and seeing what the community has to say about where they want Terraform to go. So please go to the community forum and start talking to us and let us know, what do you want to see in Terraform next? Again, thank you all for joining us on this journey to Terraform 1.0 and continuing to build. To continue talking about the workflow enhancements around Terraform Cloud and our ecosystem, I'd like to hand it off to Armon.
Thanks so much, Mitchell. I'm super excited about Terraform 1.0. Can't wait to hear more about what feedback the community has for us on that. So I want to pick up from where Mitchell left off. He spent a lot of time talking about what are the problems around Terraform that we've spent time trying to solve as well. It's not just the core heart of the infrastructure as code pieces, it's really some of the workflow challenges around it as well. And as he mentioned earlier, our first foray into this was launching Terraform Enterprise at the end of 2017 and really starting to gain adoption in 2018, and then with Terraform Cloud in early 2019. And so I think the first step in what we've sort of realized is in this journey, it's first about adopting the tool, adopting the practices of infrastructure as code, but very quickly you move beyond that into figuring out, well, how do you do this at scale? How do you do this with teams? And so I think that next challenge is around how do you build at scale? And when we talk about building at scale, it's about realizing it's not going to be a single giant Terraform configuration for all of your infrastructure. It's going to be many different teams that own parts of the overall infrastructure, and that together they need to be able to compose those pieces together. So the composability of infrastructure, allowing these small pieces to work together to form a greater whole, is a really important part of that workflow. At the same time, what teams start to realize is there's going to be many reusable patterns, right? And so we don't want every team to reinvent the wheel on these common patterns. Instead, it's about enabling reuse, right? And so there's been a big focus on Terraform modules, the public module registry, the private module registry, allowing you to define these reusable components of infrastructure and share them easily, right? And so together, these pieces form the heart of collaboration, allowing teams to each define their own workspace, allowing those workspaces to compose with one another, and allowing you to kind of share and reuse common bits of infrastructure in the form of Terraform modules. Now, as we go a little bit larger than that scale, we start to move beyond just the challenges of collaboration and composability and reuse into really thinking about standardization. How do we apply security best practice? How do we apply approaches for our compliance challenges? And so there we've made a bunch of investment into sort of policy as code as a workflow and Sentinel as a key technology. And so the idea is to implement and define these controls, whether they're security controls, compliance controls, operational best practices, define those as code as well, right, in a Sentinel policy, implement those then through Terraform Enterprise and Terraform Cloud, and so that every single Terraform execution that takes place is being validated against it. So this gives us a really high bar of knowing that all of the changes we're making, those have already been vetted and that they're in compliance with all of our policies. Right? So this is a really important piece as we think about the standardization, and this goes above and beyond just standardizing on these reusable modules, these reusable components of infrastructure. And these pieces together really are in service of how do we get to a true kind of self-service infrastructure. We want to have composability, so each team can define their own infrastructure and run as fast as they want, but compose with everybody else. We want reusable blueprints, so everyone doesn't have to redefine the same things over and over. And then we want to layer on top of that this standardization of policy, this approach to doing policy as code, so that we can make sure while everyone's running fast, they're doing it in compliance, they're doing it within the best practices and security guardrails. And all of that really leads to this kind of self-service infrastructure as code that allows you to go quickly and innovate. So I'm super excited today to talk about two new enhancements that we're announcing. The first of these is the ability to curate modules from the public registry into an organization's private registry. Today there's thousands of modules that exist in the public registry. Some of them have been downloaded tens of millions of times. But how do we go from thousands of these modules into a handful that makes sense for your organization that you can curate and manage in a more fine-grained way? So that's what this really allows you to do, is to take these modules and import them and share them within your organization's private registry in more of a curated experience. The next big announcement is really rethinking how users interact with a workspace. So at the core of how Terraform Cloud, Terraform Enterprise organize is the idea that you have a workspace which represents a set of resources. And these workspaces might be owned by teams, teams might own many of them, but it's the unit around which we organize. And so there's been a number of enhancements we've made. First of all is bringing in a rich README. So now you can have much more details around what does that workspace do, what is its purpose, how does it work, how does it fit in. You can have metrics. There's a lot more highlighted details when you land on the overview page that kind of show the important bits. And as you can see as we're going through this video, we can queue a run. And then from there, you can see when we go to the new run page, there's a lot more detail and a lot more visual elements here. So you can actually see visually as an apply is happening, what resources are impacted, what percent are being changed versus created versus modified, right? So there's a lot more information. And once that apply happens and we go back to the home screen, we can see there's these two new tables, one that actually shows us the critical outputs of that workspace. So as we're talking about composing these workspaces and consuming those outputs, we can easily see what outputs that workspace emits, as well as the resources that are under management. So really just making it a lot richer, providing that at-a-glance information as you consume these workflows. So we're super excited about both of these changes. They're available today. You can go check them out on app.terraform.io. Now, when we talk about the Terraform workflow, what we understand is that it's not just Terraform in isolation. Mitchell spent a lot of time talking about the ecosystem of providers and the integrations around Terraform and how there's thousands of those today. But it's not just about Terraform and not just about those providers. There's a whole bunch of other tooling like version control systems, CI/CD tooling, CMDBs, etc., that it's important to integrate into the provisioning lifecycle. So as we talk about it, really Terraform Cloud, Terraform Enterprise is also designed to enable the extensibility of that whole workflow to bring these different pieces in, right? That's why there's an API, that's why there's webhook mechanisms. It's designed to allow these different components to all be integrated. Now, one of the ways that we've allowed that type of integration to take place in the past is in between a plan and apply, right? We were able to apply policy with Sentinel, as we talked about, to do any number of different kind of checks. And as part of a Sentinel check, we could do a webhook out to an external system to query information from it, right? We can use the plugin SDK to write custom Sentinel logic. And so this gave us some amount of extensibility, but it might still represent having to write Sentinel policy or write custom plugins to do it, right? When we might want a more seamless way of integrating. And so today, I'm really excited to show the preview of a new capability that we're calling Terraform Run Checks. And so this is designed to make third-party integrations with the system much, much simpler. So we can define a run check, and now we can see that within the context of doing a run, in between that plan and apply, we can see that there's now multiple of these different run checks that are executing, right? And so this is going to make a call out to an external system that is going to apply some other logic. That logic could be around security policy, around costing, around change management, really anything you want it to be. And so we can see if that policy fails that we'll get a link to click through and see more details. So in this case, we're going to click through to bridge crew. And the bridge crew system, we're going to be able to see, okay, why did my policy fail? There's these lines of Terraform code that triggered us to fail this apply, right? So now the user is able to go back, make a change in their code, commit that to GitHub and say, great, I fixed these issues that were in policy. The new Terraform run can now apply. And now we can see, great, that policy has actually passed. We're able to apply our change successfully and everything is passing, right? So this is really now starting to showcase that ability to extend Terraform, really take that extensibility to the next level, where it's not just the extensibility around Terraform providers, but the extensibility of Terraform Cloud and the overall provisioning workflow around it, right? And so here we can see, great, now the apply is successfully completed, and we can go back and see which policy checks were involved with that. So we're super excited to announce this new capability. It's in beta, and it's going to be available more broadly later this summer. We're working with a number of partners. You saw the integration with Bridge Crew. We're working with folks like Checkpoint, Sneak, McAfee, Infracost, Accurix, and others. So we're super excited to have people participate in this, give us feedback, right? If you're interested in learning more, please click through and sign up to participate as part of the beta. So we've announced a lot today. I just wanted to quickly summarize. Of course, the big tentpole today was Terraform 1.0. I know we're super excited about it, our community is super excited about it, and we can't wait to hear more about what you all have to say. The other big set of updates has been around Terraform Cloud. We announced a number of new functions and capabilities. I'm really excited personally for the Terraform run checks work. Those will be available later on this summer. For folks that don't yet have a Terraform Cloud account, it's free to sign up, so I recommend going to app.terraform.io and you can register and get started with all of this today. Now, right after this, we have a number of other sessions coming up. There'll be an infrastructure keynote. That's going to go deeper into network infrastructure automation and how to apply some of this to the networking world. We're also going to have a session around Terraform 1.0 and Terraform Cloud and the updates there. And then we'll have a deep dive into all things 1.0. So lots more content. Stick around. I hope you all enjoy the rest of HashiConf.